Hi, my name is Rowan Butcher. I'm a junior political science and communications double major, and this is my final project. When I started considering what to do for the final project, I stopped and considered a few different things. I knew I wanted to interview people. I do like to give interviews and do interviews. I've been interviewing people with the radio station for the last few years now, and it's something I do like to do. And I wanted to take that and combine it with something we learned very early in the semester, which is the idea of collective, communicative, and cultural memories. So I decided to start out with a question. And my question was, does a person's collective, communicative, and cultural memories affect how they view events? Now for a quick refresher, collective memory is memory shared between you, another person, or a group. So consider like this class, for instance, would probably be a collective memory. Communicative memory is something that is done through usually like an oral tradition or something just done through talking, such as stories. And cultural memories are things that are inherent to your culture, things like religion, laws, monuments. That's what cultural memory is. So I decided to take that question, and I went with these 5 events that I asked 6 different people about. So the 5 events are 9/11, the 1947 partition of the Indian subcontinent, which split India into West Pakistan, East Pakistan, and India, the 2008 financial crash or the Great Recession, the 26/11 terrorist attack in Mumbai, India in 2008, which allegedly Pakistan was behind, and the 5th event is the David Sorbello incident. So I took these 6 people and I interviewed them on their memories, their experiences, how they feel about these events, how maybe those events changed their worldview, and we will launch into the interview now and see if this question holds true.
Okay, what's your name?
John Magnum,
What's your year?
a sophomore.
What's your major?
History education, adolescent education.
Where are you from?
Canandaigua, New York.
Where's your family from?
My father's from Detroit, my mother's from Newark, New York.
Okay, John, I'm going to ask you about 5 different events. Just tell me what do you think about them, what you remember, what your family might have said about these events.
Yeah.
Okay, the first one's going to be 9/11.
I don't remember much because I was like 3. I remember being told that we lived on base, I believe in Norfolk. My father was in the Navy, so that was stressful for that reason. I don't myself have any memories of that day though. But I remember my mother said she was very upset, obviously. She was very worried that my father would be deployed immediately. But I don't think he ended up getting deployed until 2003, the run-up to the Iraq War. That's pretty much it.
So he went abroad, he went to
Yeah,
war,
he
or?
was deployed on a destroyer that's now in a scrap heap somewhere. It's called the Deo, and I think he was XO of that ship, so he was like one of the top officers. His ship was one of the ones that launched missile strikes on Baghdad at the beginning of the invasion. He was deployed. I think he came back about 3 months after the war started in 2003. Maybe it was 2004. I don't know. It was a long time ago. I was very young.
So he saw action?
He did, yeah.
Did that affect your family and how it views things?
I think so, yeah. I think he was very, or he is now, and as far back as I can remember, he was very anti-war. He wasn't in favor of going to Iraq. Neither was my mother. And I think part of that is due to him being there. He wasn't on the ground or anything, but he was attacking them.
Okay, I'm going to move to the next event. The 1947 partition of India and Pakistan.
Well, I have a very vivid memory of the day that happened.
Yeah.
No. Mostly what I know about this I learned, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years ago in high school. We talked about it a bit in global history, but I don't remember anything from global history, except I guess that this was mentioned. And then we talked a little bit about it in another upper level history class I took in high school, but I don't know much about it.
Did your family ever mention anything? Or your close classmates?
And, I had a friend of mine in high school who was from Pakistan,
Alright.
but I never asked him about India-Pakistan split.
The next event is the Great Recession.
Yeah, I have some more memories of this because I was a little older. At that time, we were living in Vienna, Virginia, just south of Washington, D.C. My father worked for the State Department at that time. And what I remember is a lot of people in my neighborhood, we were a very suburban neighborhood, had a lot of financial difficulties. Some people were forced to move. Other people were forced to really curtail their spending. I don't really think it was something that we talked about a lot. We didn't have very much in the way of stock or bonds. We rented our house there, so the home price crash didn't really hit us very hard. We ended up taking advantage of it actually in 2010 when we moved up to New York. Got a house for cheaper anyways.
How did your parents feel about it? Was your dad still in the military at that point?
Yes, he was. He retired in 2010, so at that point he was still in the military. He's a very liberal guy. His views on it, I guess, if I were to compare it to a politician nowadays, it'd be like Bernie Sanders. He's really railing about how the bankers screwed everyone. Like I said, my direct family wasn't really affected, but his brothers and his sister in Michigan and his mother, they were all pretty hurt by it.
Detroit, the car.
Yeah, one of them lived in Detroit. One lived, I think, about 45 minutes out of Detroit. My grandmother lived in a small town called Hale. It's up north in Michigan. And then my aunt lived in, I think she lived in Ann Arbor. So they were more affected than we were. And I remember he would call them and just, talk about it, what's happening, how they're dealing with it, if he can do anything to help.
The next event is the terror attack in Mumbai, India, called 26/11. Do you have any knowledge?
I don't even know what that is.
You don't have any knowledge of
This is the first time I've ever
the
heard of this.
Taj and Oberoi attacks? A few hundred dead.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it. Okay, then the next event is the Sorbello incident that hit Geneseo last
the
semester.
sociology professor. Yeah, I remember that. That was a real shitstorm.
Yeah.
Oh, do I need to censor myself?
I
for
don't
the
think
camera?
so.
Okay. Well, it was a real shootstorm, I'll tell you that. Yeah. At the time, I was involved in a couple of clubs that PAC and Dems that were really fired up about it, mainly Dems. Yeah, I think he really fucked up. I think he really messed up there, and I don't know if the college handled it in the best way.
How would you and your peers feel like it was handled badly, or like how do you feel about it then versus now?
I mean, I think looking back, it probably wasn't as huge of a deal as everyone blew it up to be. When it happened, I didn't really think it was like a catastrophic event like some people on campus perceived it to be. I think over time more people have come around to the view that it was it was a problem. And it was obviously a mistake to hire this guy and let him teach here. But I think people have calmed down a bit about it.
Okay. What is your name?
Joshua Espinosa.
What is your year?
I'm a junior right now.
What's your major?
International relations.
Where are you from?
Most recently Pennsylvania, but I've moved around a lot.
Like where?
Do you want me to tell the whole spiel?
You got 20 seconds.
Okay, so I was born in Boston. I lived in Japan for 1 year growing up as a baby. Lived in Texas growing up there for 8 years. Lived in England for 2 years growing up after from 5th to 6th grade. Lived in the tri-state area of Hudson Valley region for most of middle school and high school. Then after high school, I lived in Pennsylvania. So there you have it.
Where's your family from?
My mom's from like the Hudson Valley area-ish on the Pennsylvania side, although that's not really Hudson Valley area, but the tri-state area of Pennsylvania in the Northeast. And my dad's from Colorado.
What activities do you do on campus?
Right now, I'm the president of the Geneseo College Republicans. I'm also an RA over at Onondaga Hall. That's probably about it for me. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna ask you. Well, I'm gonna ask you about 5 different events. We talked about it. We're gonna go over your views, what happened,
Right.
Your memories about those. So the first one's gonna be 9/11.
The first thing that I remember talking about 9/11 was I was probably about 4 or so, and my mom had like a TV on in our living room, and she was like watching it, and she could definitely like tell that she was upset. I don't exactly like know what it was. I like remember her just like being like very like focused on it, and she like told me to leave the room, and that sort of thing. Like she wouldn't let me be in there, but I don't remember really too much that happened like the days following after that or whatnot. That was like pretty much the only thing that I remember from like 9/11 itself.
How'd your family feel about it?
I mean, it's a national tragedy. They didn't really say too much. Like I don't think that my parents were ever like really heavily politically involved. Like when I was young, like they never really like, talked about politics as much as I remember at least.
How do you think it changed like your views, or how would you say it affected you and what you do?
I don't know if I'd really say it changed my views. I'd say like it's definitely one of those like establishing events that like you kind of just like grow up with, like having accepted as like a fact. So it's not like it like totally like threw off my worldview as if someone was like older and then it was like a post 9/11. Like I definitely grew up like always being in the post 9/11 generation, I'd say.
Okay. We'll just jump to the next event then. The 1947 partition between India and Pakistan. What are your memories, your views? How's your family feel about it? How has it affected you?
I don't know. It's affected me personally. I don't think I've ever heard my parents talk about it at all. I've definitely like learned more about it here, taking other classes here at college. And one of the funny things, actually, a boss was saying this. There are more people. Actually, I don't know if I want to say this because I don't know if this is.
Definitely say it.
Okay, well, I'm not sure. I don't want to like spread the fake news here because I don't know if this is verbatim. But I'm pretty sure that there are more people displaced during like the whole partition than there were in Europe during the entirety of World War II. I'm pretty sure I remember hearing that.
Interesting.
Displaced or killed, something like that. It was definitely worse than like in World War II in Europe, which is like pretty wild. It's like it really just like shows how much of a just crazy event it was.
What else did you learn about it through class?
One of the things that I thought was pretty interesting, like obviously you had like the Pakistani state, which was like majority Muslim, and India obviously majority Hindu. We mostly focused kind of like talking about like the establishment of Pakistan as like specifically like as an Islamic state with like Islamic values, although it was definitely still had like Western influences, and this is like kind of like a balance between like Western ideology and Islamic influence as well. Not so much like Hindu or India, sorry. Not so much. We didn't really talk about India so much there, but it's just like general like the partition itself and all the violence that was contained within it.
All right. So the next event we're going to talk about is the Great Recession, 2008 financial crash.
Um, I'd say that the thing that I remember most from it was probably how it affected like my school with like the budget there, because I know that the budget got voted against at least one time, I think, maybe twice. But whatever happened was, I don't know the particulars, but whatever happened was there were a bunch of teachers that ended up getting laid off, especially like younger ones who didn't have the seniority and all that. I remember my social studies teacher in 7th grade, she got laid off and she like was crying because that was like obviously not something that she wanted to see happen to her, and she was like pretty good. She's a really good teacher, but I remember that was definitely like probably one of the things that stood out to me the most.
How does your family feel about it? How's your family?
I guess you could say like my family wasn't like really like that impacted by it. Like my dad didn't lose his job or anything, and he still helped like my mom like take care of us and like raise us even though they were divorced at the time. So it didn't really impact us too much, which we're thankful for. But I definitely remember like seeing like other like newsreels and just like footage of people who had like lost their homes and been foreclosed on, and you could definitely tell that it was something that people were definitely feeling the pinch.
How do you think it affected you, the event itself?
I think it's definitely like kind of like led to sparking my interest in politics to a greater degree, I'd say. Especially when you can see like how it affected all the things that ended up happening in Europe with like Greece and how the austerity programs they had to enact over there, and coupling that with the EU and just all the politics that play into that. So I think it's probably just something that sparked my greater interest in politics.
Alright, the next event is 26/11. This is a terror attack that happened in India in 2008. It happened in Mumbai.
Was that the one where they think it was like suspected of like Pakistan funding like the terrorists?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I don't really know too much about that, but like I've briefly read up upon that. I know that some people were worried that it might lead to like a full out war between the two countries, especially since like they were thought to have been funded by Islamabad, but it never really escalated to that point. So I guess that's a good thing, I guess. Although I guess the underlying issues are still present.
Yeah. Has your family ever talked about it? Has it ever influenced you, I guess? You said you read about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've read about it just because like I was curious and like I happened to like find it. But like we're not like Hindu or Pakistani, so we like have no real stake in the game over there or anything to really be interested about. I'm probably like most interested of geopolitical events, definitely the most out of all my family.
The class ever covered? It's pretty recent, so I don't know if any classes.
We don't go that modern.
Alright, well, then the last event we could talk about is the Sorbello incident of Geneseo. It happened last semester, yeah, sociology professor.
I thought it was interesting in how because I had this one of my friends, his sister, a good friend from high school, his sister goes here, and she was in the class, and she thought that while it might have been a bit crude and kind of like off the cuff for him to like say it like that, she didn't think that he went out of his way to really like go after anyone or target anyone and disparage any groups, which I think I've heard that from a few other students as well. So I think that it's kind of unfortunate to see the backlash that followed. It wasn't really seem like there was too much rationale that went into it. It was definitely more of like an emotional reaction that was, oh, you need to take a stance now. You got to do something about this guy. You got to get him out of here, rather than just like kind of taking a more measured approach to it.
How do you feel your peers took it, or like how your opinion versus your peers' opinion, the other Geneseo students?
I mean, I'd say like this is definitely like a lot of fairly liberal campus, I'd say. So I think like I'm definitely more on the conservative side of the issue. I think as a professor, like he probably should be able to run his classroom without fear of like getting the mob incited against him, and who knows what else someone might say next that would raise the hue and cry and get them fired next. So I think I'm definitely in the minority in that sense. So, because especially when you had a lot of people who were saying just that he's like transphobic and all that, which if you know the guy and look into like what he's done, I've heard like a lot of people have say that he was like pretty helpful with the transgender community and he was able to support people who did come out as trans. I mean, I can't speak to myself personally about those events, but I have heard that from a decent amount of people. So it seems that people don't really like care to like look into the deeper issues of it. They just want to like go with whatever like strikes them as their first response to, and which in this case was just seems that people wanted him to get fired.
What? What?
Can't take anything. It's okay. I'm okay. I'm together.
What is your name?
Katrina Telepod.
What is your year?
I am a sophomore.
What's your major?
Political science.
Where are you from?
Syracuse, New York.
Where's your family from?
Upstate region.
Interesting. What activities do you do on campus?
I'm in Roosevelt Institute, College Democrats, and Mock Trial. And Women's Action Coalition.
Okay, we're gonna start with our first event, which is 9/11.
Oh, of course.
Okay, so what do you remember of 9/11?
I honestly don't really remember it at all.
Was your
I
family?
was at my sister's elementary school.
Huh.
We picked her up, and then that's all I remember.
Was your family remember?
Well, my mom was at my brother's school talking to his principal about, like, his education and shit. And then it was on the TV, and they were like, oh, no.
How'd your peers feel about the event?
Negatively.
Negatively?
Negatively.
Oh, who'd have thunk? But yeah, around the I guess also, like, how did the event shape, like, how did it shape you? How do you think it shaped your worldview and all that?
Well, it was interesting because at the time of 9/11, I went to a school that had a population of Muslim students, whereas I feel like a lot of people, they didn't get that experience. I feel like it was a little different, like being in class with people who were Muslim while everyone else was, like, kind of vilifying them in the media and whatnot.
How do you think your parents felt about 9/11?
I think they kind of took the more stereotypical route with it because my mother, she didn't really, I don't think, neither of my parents really, like, I feel, understood the depth of it. Like, when my mother was explaining 9/11 to me, she was basically like, oh, you know, these people who just really don't like American culture, but skipping over the fact of, like, the history of the United States and the Middle East, I don't really think she understood that.
Alright. We can move on to the next event, which is the 1947 partition of India. Do you have any memories of this?
No.
Not at all. Oh my god.
Zero memories.
Yeah. Do you think your family has any memories in regards to the 1947 partition of India?
Well, I come from a very waspy family, so especially like my grandfather was a pastor, and my grandpa was pretty racist. My other grandpa was pretty racist, and so I basically think that they didn't reflect on it much, and they didn't really have much of a memory of it.
I think your peers felt about the 1947 partition of India.
Like my peers growing up, or like my peers.
Well, just
No.
everybody. Anybody
Everybody?
you know.
I feel like in general people really didn't have that much knowledge about it. You know, especially in history classes we focus on, like, you know, the Erie Canal and, you know, New York history and America, how we're so great and how we're so, like we fought against Great Britain and got our freedom and stuff, but we don't really acknowledge other people in other countries who are going through different types of conflict.
You mentioned your grandparents. How long has your family been here?
Well, I have ancestors that fought in the American Revolution, so a while.
Then what's with your last name?
Teleport?
Yeah, I thought you were Eastern European, because your first name's Katrina.
It's actually German. Because, like, when my family came here, the last name was Dallenbach. And then it got Americanized through, like, school systems and different churches and stuff to Teleport. So it's not like, it's like an Americanized German name.
I see.
It's not Eastern European.
Okay, well, that takes us to our next event, which is the Great Recession, the 2008 financial crash. Do you have any memories of this?
Yeah, well, my dad lost his job in 2009, so it was pretty close to that event. So that was the biggest impact on me personally, I think.
How'd your parents feel about that then?
Well, I feel like, especially because my dad did lose his job, so it had like a lot more of a personal effect. I feel like a lot of times people talk about it and they don't really like understand the full impact of it, but my parents really like firsthand experienced a lot of like the struggles of it.
How do you think your peers felt about the Great Recession?
Um, well, I think it was like obviously negatively, but especially like the school I went to in particular, like the poverty rate was over 50%, so I think it was like people were already pretty bad, like badly off, and then they were worse off, and so it was more so like the entire country like kind of realizing a lot of these struggles that they had lived with for a while, I guess.
How do you think this event changed how you view things and how you move forward from that event?
Well, I definitely like think it shaped me a lot as a person because like growing up with like that kind of financial struggle for that period of time like really gave me firsthand experience with like a lot of the economic issues that people talk about. So I feel like it like shaped my worldview of like politics and like how I view that sort of thing.
Would you say this event is why you seem to skew more left?
I think it's like kind of like a culmination of things because I grew up in a more diverse school with like more like economic diversity, and then like this event specifically where I had to like my family did rely on like government support, like the one where like what is it called when you lose your job and then you get money? Unemployment benefits. So my family kind of really did rely on unemployment benefits, and there was like, if we didn't have that, we'd have probably lost our house. So I feel like it plays into it, but there's like a broader aspect that makes me a liberal.
All right. Okay, the next event is 2611. What do you know about 2611?
26. Not much.
No. It's like every time I ask this question, it's like people, they just turn to a quiz question, they just don't know it. And they just turn to the next question.
Next question, please.
No, I can't. It's a 2008 terror attack in India, Mumbai, regarding the Taj and Oberoi hotels. Do you have any memory of this? 2008?
No.
No? Around the same time as the Great Recession?
No.
No? Okay, does your family have any memory of this?
Nope.
Has this changed your worldview in any way?
Well, it probably does now.
Yeah.
Now that I know that I don't know it.
Okay, I think we're just gonna move to the next event. So the Sorbello incident, the Geneseo incident, last semester, the sociology professor. What's your memory of this?
Well, I just remember it kind of like spiraling really fast. I just saw like this post about this professor that said really like transphobic things. And I thought it was going to be something that stayed within like our campus, and then it kind of had like short-lived national attention, just a little bit for a while, which shocked me because we're such a small school. But and then it kind of seemed to die down.
How do you think your peers remember this or applied, I guess, their experiences to it? How do you think you differed from your peers in this regard?
Well, a lot of obviously I'm very left-leaning, and a lot of the friends I associate with are very liberal people. And so I think they kind of took it more so as like, the institution of Geneseo like systematically like oppressing students in that kind of way. Which I do think is partially true, but I more so viewed it as like one professor who shouldn't have ever been hired. And I guess my peers tended to view it as like Geneseo as a whole being like transphobic and corrupt, but I think what I saw come out of it is the opposite, that Geneseo is actually a pretty inclusive place for people because of the student reaction.
How do you think Sorbel may change the way you view things? Do you think it may have changed the way you view things?
Not really, because like I saw it and I was like, this is horrible, and then everyone else was like, this is horrible. So it was kind of like there wasn't like a dissenting opinion that I really heard from it. So it's kind of more so a circle jerk, I guess, of everyone being like, this sucks. And I don't really think you can change your opinion from circle jerks.
Okay. Well, I think that's it. Okay, we're starting. What's your name?
Supriya Janeja,
What's your year?
senior,
What is your major?
business administration.
What do you do on campus?
I am the Student Association Director of Business Affairs, a gold mentor. I am also a supervisor at Milne Library and a professional development chair for Society for Human Resources Management.
Where are you from?
Rochester, New York,
Where is your family from?
India,
Where in India?
North India,
Where in North India?
near Delhi.
Okay. Okay, we're going to jump into our 5 events now. The first event is 9/11.
Okay.
So tell me about your memories of 9/11.
I think the only memory I have of 9/11 is coming home from school and seeing it on the TV because my dad was watching TV. That's it.
What memories does your family have of it, your peers?
I know a lot of people remember that they remember when it happened, their teachers got a call and they all saw it. The teachers like went to a teacher's lounge and like saw it on TV. I know a lot of people had family who were like in like New York and like classmates got called out of class. I know somebody who went here, his parents were there and actually worked during were one of the first responders for 9/11. So
Who's your family remember about 9/11? Are you?
I think my parents, I have a distinct memory of them, like, after a couple weeks after 9/11, we went to, like, Philadelphia to my dad's cousin's house just because, like, they were still kind of shaken up about being in the New York area. But that was it.
Alright. We can jump to our next event. The 1947 partition of India. It's a pretty important event.
Okay.
What are your memories of it?
I don't have any memories of it. My dad does.
This is important.
This is important.
Okay.
His mother was captured in the partition by, like, Pakistan. And then she was kept at a camp for, I think, like, a week or something. And then I guess it ended. And she was thankfully, like, returned to her mom. So, like, it ended up working out. But, like, that's my dad's biggest memory of that.
How old's your dad?
My dad, 1960. But his mom. So, like,
Yeah.
my dad's 55, 56?
Was that, but wait, so was your dad's mom
Like, very young.
on the Pakistan side? Or
So,
was
like,
she...
technically my my grandma is from, like, Kashmir. Or Lahore. One of those.
Oh.
So then, like, she was there, and then after the partition, they moved to India. She's not, like, Muslim, though.
Yeah, so do they, I'm sorry to say, so
Because she was, like, a Hindu living in Pakistan.
So they forced her out.
Yeah,
Oh.
they forced her out.
that was your dad's mom. What
Mhm.
about your mom's parents?
My mom's parents had nothing really to do with it. Or she's never really told me anything about that.
Were they on the India side?
I think so, yeah.
How's that affected your family?
I think my dad still holds a lot of anger, like, and prejudice against, like, Pakistani people or Muslim people, especially since that was his mom. So there's might be still resentment left over from that. I think, I don't know how much resentment my grandparents have, but that's the only thing I could think of.
Alright, we could jump to our next event, which is the Great Recession, the 2008 financial crash. What are your memories?
I remember that my parents lost money in the recession. my uncle lost a lot of money in the recession. Like, they had to, they went into debt for, like, a long time because of the recession. I know that. I remember there used to be a lot of news articles about it, and I think I remember learning more about it after it had happened. And then once Obama was elected after in 2012, they just talked about the recession a lot.
How your peers remember the Great Recession?
I think some are more informed than others. I know a lot of them were concerned about, like, the housing bubble and stuff like that, and they talk about how it might happen again, and that's pretty much the extent.
So, do you think your parents still, like, remember the recession? Like, do they? You said that obviously, like, most people lost some stuff during the recession. Do you think they still, like, think about it, or?
Yeah, I think the recession made them invest less, because I think they got kind of, like, freaked out with how much, like, how much money they, like, lost and stuff like that. Besides that, like, I don't know how much more thought they put into that, but yeah, I know they just don't invest a lot of money anymore.
Well, we could jump into our next event, the 26/11 attack.
26/11.
Yeah, 26/11. Do you know this attack?
No.
2008, Mumbai, India.
Oh, the Taj Mahal?
Yeah. The Taj and Oberoi hotels.
Okay. I vaguely.
Do you remember this?
I remember seeing it on TV. My aunt used to work there, and I was there when she heard about it for the first time, because somebody called her to turn on the TV, and she turned on the TV and she saw it, and then she called her friends and then, like, other people. But that's it. That's honestly the only thing I know about that.
Your family, are they around Mumbai? Do you have family around?
My aunt. She was from Mumbai. She was just visiting for, like, a couple of weeks. Her husband was still in Mumbai, and both for her sons. No, one son was in Colombia, and the other one was in RIT. So it was just her and her husband.
How do you think did it affect your family as a whole, or was it?
I think it affected, because some parts of my family are in India, and then, like, some parts are here. It didn't really necessarily affect parts here, but it might have affected them over there. After that, I never really asked about it, so.
Alright. Well, we could jump into our last event, which is the Sorbello incident that happened last semester on campus. The sociology professor, what do you remember about it?
I remember that it blew up very virally. So, like, it was everywhere very quickly. I know there was a lot of outrage. By no means do any of us condone it. I think that it escalated to a point where it probably could have been handled better, I would say.
How do you think your peers felt about it?
I think a lot of people in Geneseo get this kind of mob mentality, where when one thing happens, people are very quick to jump on a bandwagon, but then do the bare minimum to actually enact change. And then within, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, a lot of people who were so gung-ho about the whole incident kind of faded away.
Do you think there was a difference between how the greater Geneseo population felt, not the Geneseo population, but the Geneseo students?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, so, I mean, I used to vice chair the Student Senate, and you're higher up on SA, it's the Student Association.
Yeah.
Do you think there was a difference between how those, because we're both pretty privy to information that even, like, administrators and professors don't hear.
Yeah.
So do you think there was a difference between maybe between those circles that maybe had more of a fuller story and other circles?
I think so. I think a lot of it was hearsay at that point, and yes, we do get privy information just because of our positions, but I think a lot of them sometimes chose not to listen to the information that they were given and simply just wanted more information because they felt like they deserved it. And a lot of the information that it could be argued that they did deserve the information, but a lot of it was privacy and personnel issues that no matter how much harder you push, you're not going to get it. So demanding for something that is physically not impossible, that is physically impossible, can just become not
Like a
like
hard
pointless.
place,
Pointless, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of like the Rotundo situation.
It is like the Rotundo situation. There's a lot of instances where things happen and you just can't get the information because it's not possible.
Alright, well, I think that's it. What's your name?
Tanjim Kazi.
What's your year?
I'm a freshman.
What's your major?
Biophysics.
Where are you from?
Queens, New York City.
Where is your family from?
Dhaka, Bangladesh.
What activities do you do on campus?
I'm on the board of Shakti.
That's cool. Okay, so as I said earlier, I'm just gonna ask you some, five events, and then you'll go into those events. So the first event is 9/11.
What about it?
Good question. So, what do you remember about 9/11?
I was too young to remember 9/11. I don't think. Yeah, I don't remember 9/11. I just hear. I remember secondhand accounts.
What kind of secondhand accounts?
From the local park near my house, my parents could see the smoke from the towers. And they would hear sirens going around the entire city the entire day, nonstop. And my mom said she wouldn't let my dad go to work. But these are all anecdotal. It's what I heard secondhand.
How'd your parents feel about it, or like even your friends, neighbors?
Well, I know in response to 9/11, my parents put up an American flag in front of our door. And I guess, it's to show like we're friendly, we're American, we're, I guess, we also want to be accepted within America, and that we have no sympathy for who the terrorists were.
How do you think your views might have changed after 9/11, or 9/11 may have affected your views?
I mean, 9/11 definitely affects my views, especially because that was one of the primary things people used to antagonize Muslims. And being a Muslim myself, that definitely affects me directly, because people oftentimes have preconceived notions about who I am based on this one event that occurred when I was, a year and a half old. Actually, no, I was 2 years old. Yeah.
Do you have family here that's affected by it?
Hmm?
Do you have family here outside of your own family, outside of your nuclear family?
Oh, yeah.
How do they feel about it? Have you talked to them about it?
Oh, yes, I've talked to them about it. My aunt has been harassed before because she wears the veil. So, I guess, 9/11 definitely, directly affected both my nuclear family and my extended family.
Your aunt wears a hijab or a niqab?
A hijab, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll just jump to our next event. It's the 1947 partition. The India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So how has it affected you, your family?
Well, during the 1947 partition, India was split up into, modern day India, and then it was East Pakistan and West Pakistan. And after that, in 1972, East Pakistan declared independence from West Pakistan, and that became known as Bangladesh, and that's where my family's from. So I guess the partition was definitely an important part of what happened, I guess, in my family's overall history, because it forced us to assimilate into a specific cultural background, specifically that of being Pakistani and then eventually being Bengali.
Were they there during the 1972 war?
Oh yeah, my grandmother was there, and my uncles were there. The war was in 1971. Independence was won in 1972. And my mother was born in the year of 1972, so.
Were they forced out of any areas? Because that was a big problem, diaspora during partition.
Yeah, my grandmother was forced to be a refugee, and she had to what was it? She had to flee to the eastern part of Bangladesh, right by the border of Myanmar. I think it's called Burma now. I'm not sure.
Do you think that that event, partition, influenced how your family viewed the world, people, events, anything really?
Well, I know my grandfather. He was a prisoner of war during that time, and he was the only one from his unit to have gotten out of prison alive. So I guess there was definitely this stigma that came along with that. Like he had a lot of I guess mental challenges after that, and that kind of also drove him to like. He was a very stereotypical man. Like he didn't trust like Pakistanis. If he heard someone speaking Urdu or Hindi, it'd be like over for him.
Did they stay in Bangladesh, or did they eventually come here? Did they come here to
So my grandma's primary residence is Bangladesh, and my grandfather died many years ago. My grandma, she bounces between her children essentially. She has some in Bangladesh, some here, and some in Europe.
I'll just bring us to the next event, which is the Great Recession, the 2008 financial crash. Any memories of that?
I remember my father telling me that he had a college fund saved for me and my little brother, but because of the recession in 2008, he lost most of that money. He also lost a good portion of his money in the stock market, so that set him back a lot. So he spent, I guess, the next, I'd say 10 years recovering from that financially. And I guess he sort of still dwells on the fact that he could have gotten his money out of there sooner, but it didn't work out like that.
So that's how your dad felt. Anything with how your mom felt, or maybe your grandparents? Because you said earlier they sometimes come here and they go back. And I know with the currency exchange in South Asia is very hard with American dollars.
Yeah. I mean, all this stuff that I know about my dad was actually conveyed to me by my mom. So most of what I heard was essentially from my mother, not my father. And in regards to my grandmother, during the 2008 recession, she offered to help out financially, but in regards to South Asian culture, that's not too accepting money from your elder isn't exactly the best thing to do. So, yeah.
How do you think the recession changed how you view things? How your peers viewed things?
Well, I think the recession was definitely a waking up call. Prosperity can only go so far. There are definitely going to be bumps in the road. So I guess it definitely lets people know to not lose themselves when things are going well, because they have to continue watching what's going on. I think that's definitely something that I practice in my own life because of the pain I saw that happened during that time.
I can move it to the next event, which is 26/11. Do you know what that is?
Say it again.
26/11.
Explain.
2008 terror attack in Mumbai, India,
Oh,
for the Taj and Oberoi hotels.
yeah, the hotel, yeah. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, near 10 years, right? I
Yeah.
think it's gonna be 10 years soon.
So, what about it?
Alright, so, do you remember anything from it, or do you know anything about it?
I think it was one of the first few times I understood what was going on in the news. I remember I was watching, was it CNN? It was just in big letters saying there was a terrorist attack in Mumbai. And I was kind of confused because I didn't realize that India wasn't I assumed India was like almost a homogenous place, so I didn't expect there would be like um, disagreements, I guess, in terms of like religion or politics or anything like that. But obviously there was. I guess that was kind of a waking up call for me that it could happen anywhere.
Did your family ever reflect on the event, or your peers?
Yeah, my father was extremely mad about what happened. I remember he was watching TV and he was like just angrily screaming about what was going on the TV. And he invited his friends over later that day, I remember, and they all discussed like what happened.
If you don't mind me asking, was your grandfather alive around the time of this event?
No.
Did your grandmother have any thoughts in regards to this event? Do you know?
I wouldn't know. She wasn't in America at the time.
I'll move to the next event then. That is the Sorbello incident that happened last semester on Geneseo. David Sorbello.
Was it the double murder suicide? Is that
No, it was a few years ago. Sociology professor.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Quiz.
Yeah.
Did the transphobic quiz.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that? What were your thoughts around that time?
Well, obviously, like a lot of people are having emotional responses to it. Obviously, something that's transphobic can definitely hurt somebody on the inside, and just in general, it wouldn't. It's not something that's welcome on a college campus like ours. But I wasn't too outraged because I just didn't know like what the situation was. I was hearing a lot of secondhand accounts, but I didn't know exactly what the situation was. So I did my best not to pass judgments too early on.
Do you think part of that might have been because you're a freshman, or like you're new to the school, so you might not have known fully like what was going on, or do you think that was?
I mean, I feel like even though I was a freshman, identifying something as transphobic should be like a regular skill that people have. But like being a freshman didn't like deter me from thinking about these things. I was just more I thought like that the incident that occurred was definitely unfortunate, but because I couldn't have because like there wasn't real evidence to like sort from, passing judgments and being very vocal about that isn't like possible.
How'd your peers feel about Sorbello?
Well, most of my peers called for his firing. Most of them based on secondhand accounts just called for his firing, and admittedly that was not something I was I guess in tune with. Like I want the facts before I make judgments on something. So seeing that occur kind of like showed me how like I guess fragile the fabric of this campus is.
I think that's it. Oh yeah, what's your name?
Aisha Mukhayer.
Okay, what is your year?
You're a senior?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a senior.
What's your major?
Anthropology.
What activities do you do on campus?
I am part of the Anthro Club, treasurer. I was part of the AACE board. I am a TA, and that's about it.
Where are you from?
I was born in Pakistan, raised in Queens, New York.
Where's your family from?
Pakistan.
Okay. The first event we're going to be talking about is 9/11. So, do you remember anything like specific about 9/11?
I remember the news and like people freaking out and like, I mean, my parents really never watch American news, but like my dad was in the city at that time, so like we heard about it and like it was everywhere, so we were seeing it. There was a lot of panic. I think I was in pre-K at that time,
So they didn't really bring it up. I mean, you can't bring that stuff up to pre-K, but like it was just very quiet, I suppose. Yeah, it was just very like it was just there was a lot of like security and stuff around, but other than that, nothing I could really remember from that point.
Do you know how your parents maybe remember 9/11 or the events surrounding it?
Oh
before or
yeah, it
after?
was they always describe America as like before and after 9/11 because like there was just a huge shift in like American culture, policy, etc. like after 9/11. So like my dad had more troubles at work. I mean, we lived in a very majority Muslim neighborhood, and like everyone was like brown or like Bengali or Indian or Pakistani, but so we always lived within our community. But like when we go outside our community, you kind of have a distinct feeling. So they saw that a lot during that time.
How do your peers remember 9/11?
My peers, like school friends or something, like how school people.
Yeah, I guess your school friends or even maybe your temple friends or your neighborhood friends. Any of those?
Again, it's like it was so huge because I'm from the city. Like there was just a lot of changes we had to deal with, but like again, we were so young to really understand the magnitude of what happened. We were like 4 or 5 years old, so like we didn't understand the political stuff and we didn't get it. We just felt like, oh, you know, this bad thing happened, so many people died, but afterwards it changed, like when we got older.
How do you think 9/11 maybe changed your worldview or affected it?
I mean, I grew up Muslim in a post 9/11 America. It's like you have to deal with racism and bigotry and all that stuff, and like people looking at you a certain way, you having to become more American. It changed a lot, like airport security, and like us, just because of our names and stuff, we have to go through like 10 hours of security rather than rather than what other people go through. But again, like the whole magnitude of it hit us like when you're way older rather than at that time specifically.
Yeah. Alright, we can move on to the next event, which would be the 1947 partition of the Indian subcontinent. Do you have? Well, I guess you obviously wouldn't have any memories, but would your family have any memories?
Oh yeah. So my grandparents were born in India. My dad's side is from Hyderabad, while my mom's side is from Lucknow, and my dad was born like in like 10 years after the partition, so he doesn't really remember much, but like his parents and my grandparents were like really huge part of it. My parents described it as something like that changed the political situation, and it was like, again, it was by like the British that did it, and so that was weird. Where our people, like people who migrated from India to Pakistan, are called Mahajir. That's the term that they use for us. That basically is my migrant. And it was just a lot of struggle. My parents told me like getting back on your feet, you gotta start in a whole other place. You leave family behind. And it's like, and it's, you know, it was just a lot of struggle. That's what they said.
Yeah, how do you think it affected? I mean, your grandparents obviously were very affected, but how do you think that may have affected your family's worldview and your grandparents specifically?
Like the whole reason the partition happened was based on religion. So because, you know, the British didn't think that Muslims and Hindus could get along at all, so they sliced India apart. So like my parents grew up in like this mentality that, like Hindus and Muslims shouldn't really. And like, it's not like they look down on them, it's just more like, we're so different. And like, that's them, this is us. Like, them versus us mentality. And like there was a lot of propaganda going on around that time. So like, my parents grew up in that propaganda, so they didn't know like the Holocaust. My dad didn't really believe in it when he was young because in the propaganda during that time they didn't know much about the Holocaust and stuff. So like that kind of stuff, and like it was just a lot of military stuff going on in the early days. But like yeah, so it changed a lot. Like because they grew up in like a very secular country of just Muslims, and it's very different compared to everywhere else.
Do your grandparents still live there, or are they?
No, they passed away, but my family, like my immediate family, still live in Pakistan, but like my dad's cousins or my mom's cousins, a lot of them still live in India. But we've never gone to India. My mom has when she was younger, to see her family, her mom's family, but we've never been to India.
Is your mom from Lucknow or?
Lucknow, yeah. Well, she wasn't born there, but she was born in Pakistan. But her family, yeah, she went to visit her mom's village in Lucknow.
So were both of your grandparents from the Indian side then pre-partition?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah.
So they both too. We can move on to our next event then. The Great Recession. So that's the 2008 financial
Oh
crash.
yeah.
Any memories of that? Your own memories?
It was just like there was such a huge shift. I remember, in like prices. Like I remember the price of milk shot up. Like my mom complaining about that, and I remember, because again, like I didn't really have anything to do with like household like finances, so I really didn't understand it again. But like my parents cutting down on spending, my dad being more stressed out about bills and stuff. I remember like, and then jobs being more and more difficult. My mom very like moving around the system and like trying to save as much as she can. I remember that. It was just yeah, and I again like the city is always more expensive to live in than anywhere else. So like spendings were cut down by a lot, and like gas was expensive. I remember that much. But yeah, I mean, again, like I was a kid and I really didn't understand what was really happening until like much later.
Do you think the event, like your parents would remember it? I mean, they obviously remember very well. The like cutting down spending. Do you think it would like heavily affect them now still, or?
Yeah, I mean, like my parents, they still like they just realize like even in a country like America where people say people always come for the American dream and type stuff, but like how it could become very difficult in a small amount of time, and like how nothing is like for sure. Like you really gotta unless like you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, money is living in New York City, one of the most expensive places to live in, like how difficult it is to raise a family there. So I think that I mean it was more of they dealt with the problem more than our generation did.
How do you think the Great Recession maybe affected your worldview, or how like you move forward from that?
Again, like it makes me more thankful, like about work ethic and like just savings in general. Like so you don't like nothing's for sure, so you gotta be on top of your game when it comes to like finances and stuff, and be careful and like not to take anything for granted. I mean, and then like later on, like you just got to be careful and what you invest in and etc. What was the other part of your question? I'm sorry.
Just how it affected your worldview.
Yeah, again, like I could say a lot about like American politics and like America really hasn't done that well. I mean, Obama did do good, but like jobs are still running out. There's like cities becoming like barren places. Like for example, Syracuse. It's like there's no, in like Rochester, there's no economy there anymore. So like there could be more done, but like especially under this presidency, nothing's gonna be done. So, it's like, and America has so many like social problems too on top of that. So it's gonna be a long struggle.
We can move on to our next event, which is 26/11. Do you know 26/11? It was a terror attack in India in 2008.
I think I might know.
Mumbai, the Taj and Oberoi hotels.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Do you have any memories of that event?
I just remember reading about it mostly because I remember like I think it was by Muslim extremists. Yeah. And I remember of course reading about that, and like Pakistan was brought up, of course, and like another war between India and Pakistan, and how it's gonna basically ruin the countries because both Pakistan's like a nuclear, I don't know, is India a nuclear power?
Yeah.
Yeah, so both of them are nuclear powers, and like I remember internationally like there was this huge thing, like these two countries, they go to war, it's fucking terrible. But like whenever the idea of like these Muslim extremists comes up, like this whole news, like my parents are like always pissed off about it because they always put us under the rug and all of us in like the same circle, and they don't like that. And I remember like my parents were like, like it's not, and like I remember the reaction by the Indian government wasn't really good because they were barreling down on like Muslim communities, like they were doing like searches and stuff, which wasn't like illegal searches, and there was a lot of like protests and stuff going on about that, I remember, but not much.
How do you think what do you think your parents or your family generally remembers about that event?
Again, it's just they probably remember because Pakistani news showed it. I remember that. So my parents watched it, and like they were just like, it's sad, people die. But they also bring up the fact that like like we've had, they always say like, I know it's not fair, but like they said like in Pakistan there's always terror attacks every day. Like if you go to northern Pakistan, Taliban, like the amount of killings and bombings they did, and that never really shows up in international news, but like India, because it's such a friendly of America, it's it always shows up in the news. So like they were just saying things like that, but I was like, people died, you should be sad about that. But it's like, again, like putting all Muslims under the same circle, and it's for stupid shit that one small minority did. That kind of reaction.
Do you think the event maybe changed your outlook on anything, or it kind of?
Not really. Like I always knew India and Pakistan always had these issues since 1947. We've been in constant like struggle, especially over like the issue of Kashmir. But again, it's like these extremists, man, like they're doing it everywhere. It's not just India. They're doing it everywhere. Or America, the more killings that they do it's majority Muslim countries, so it's like.
Alright, we can move on to the last event, which is the David Sorbello incident that happened in Geneseo last semester, the sociology professor.
Oh, right.
Do you have any memories of that?
Yeah, oh yeah. Because my one of my housemates was in his class that he was teaching, and she was there when that event took place. So she told me first, and I was like, "What the fuck?" Like in a liberal arts school, like what? And then like someone put the picture up online, and like there was just this huge, like what? And then it went on BuzzFeed, and then it went on to like Daily Mail, and then it just became a national news thing, and then it became international news. And I was just like, and then there was protests, like, because I have friends who are transgender, and like they were like they were outraged, and of course everyone should be outraged. Like how can a professor do something like that? That's just prejudice and like disgusting, and it was very transphobic. And again, and then like there was also the backlash of how the school dealt with it, because they took so long to deal with it. And like, and like I'm glad that he was fired or he was let out. I don't even know, like they never specified. But I remember of a friend of a friend told me that he actually got another job, like a higher paying job, and his wife, they met his wife, and his wife was like pissed off at the school for letting him go on like something this small, and I was like, that's not, like, I don't know what era you live in, but that's not considered small. And like I remember reading that he also had not a sexual harassment case against him previously, and I'm like, really, like, Geneseo, you fucked up bad. Like, how can you not, I thought you like do like background checks or some shit, and like how can you let a guy like that into the school? Like, I was disgusted. It was like, what is wrong with this guy?
Do you think your peers shared a lot of the same thoughts?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't remember one person who didn't. They either were like, what, like astonished, like it's still, this kind of thing still existed. I mean, it existed, but like they would see it on our campus, like because. But then we like had this conversation, like this school has a bad history of like prejudice and racism, and like it was, I feel like it was because there was like the Nazi symbols and like the racial slurs, and then we had
There's the blackface thing.
Yeah, the blackface thing, and then there was we had a transgender student who was harassed here, and I think in the town they went to a bar and they were harassed, and I was just so like again, like, but like this is a liberal arts school where these things shouldn't be happening. And like the amount of like rape cases that I've seen in this school too, it's like, wow. Like they think that, because it's majority girls and like we're all like kids from like, we're millennials, it's like it's different. No, like fucked up people exist every generation. It was, yeah, but no, I didn't meet anybody who did not share my opinion on the matter.
Do you think the Sorbello incident maybe changed your view on, I guess, Geneseo?
Yeah, I definitely did.
Is there like a pre-post Sorbello thing, or like?
Not really, because I remember freshman year and I read about the Nazi stuff, and I'm just like, and I was thinking like, what are they doing to deal with this? And I just read like they had like, I don't know, like they brought a speaker in. I'm like, that's not. They should be harsher with these things, and like I've had friends who come up to me and tell me things like my black friends, and they would like, people call them the N-word on campus, like sororities and fraternities, like kids from, like, I've heard horror stories, and I'm just like, and there's truth in those horror stories. And then the Sorbello, I'm just saying, it's like the icing on the cake of like a shit cake that's been boiling in this school for so long. They need to do better. And I don't think President Battles has done enough. there needs to be harsher. I'm glad that he was let off. I mean, he deserved it, but like, just because you're hiding it from us doesn't really mean that we don't know what's going on, you know? Like, I think that's the reason why they didn't give out details, because you don't protect privacy. What is that? He was being transphobic in a sociology class of all places. Like, it was just, you know, like, there was no poster pre. Things were building and building, and then it just became like that.
Do you think, as you think it'll happen again, or do you think the Geneseo has learned that it should probably
About things like having a former sexual harasser, like having a sexual harasser on campus, yeah, they probably will do more background checks, but like, they need to have more of an inclusion. I don't feel like there's an air of inclusion here because there's such a majority white, like, you know, white, what is it called, demography on this campus, that we're the minority, you know. And then, like, of course, then transgender people of the LGBTQ plus I plus community are, again, they're minority on this campus. And, you know, they're working hard. They've made these all gender bathrooms, and they have the pride, like, they have pride stuff going on. But, like, I feel like school doesn't do enough for them. They have to do it, which is messed up. I feel like the school needs to give them the proper support and, like, you know, like, hey, we're here for you. They didn't do that once. She just gave, like, half-hearted emails, or like she thinks she walks around, says hello to everyone, and she knows it. She doesn't. Like, I've talked to a friend, my friend Taylor. She's like a huge part of Pride. I think she was like the president. And she told me, like, not once did battles ever show up to, like, the events, or she would show up once and, like, leave after a couple of minutes. And I'm just like, see, if the leader of if the president of the school isn't invested, then what can we expect from the school itself, you know?
Yeah, that's what I know for, like, Shakti stuff. I think she does the same thing. She just walks around for like a minute. She just leaves.
Yeah, like, it's just like, you think you, like, that gives, you don't care. That just basically says that, you know? So, yeah, it was like, wow, this school has shaking my head type, you know?
Would there around the same time, I do some stuff in Student Senate. There was a proposal to push mandatory safe zone training, or like minority inclusion training.
Yeah.
Would you be in favor of something like that?
Yeah, like, why? Especially in the era we live in, this Trump America, where people are being outwardly racist, not like, or being, again, like, homophobic and transphobic, and they're being violent about it. It's like, you know, you think, oh, they're just writings on the wall, you could ignore them. Then what can stop that person from doing it again and again and going to the point of becoming violent? So I feel like mandatory safe zone training, mandatory sensitivity training, and, like, is very like, it should be mandatory. Why I don't know why it isn't. I've been to safe zone training, and I felt it was a great experience. I feel like, you know, I learned a lot. And people think, like, you know, like, oh, I don't really know a lot of gay people. I don't know a lot of black or, you know, Hispanic or whatever. Then I don't know. Like, you're gonna be living in the world. You can't just go along with that mentality.
Yeah.
So I feel like that would be a great thing to have, especially in the light of all this crap that's happened.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, I think that's it.
Cool.
Okay, if you just sat through the about 70 minutes of interview, you probably learned a few things about the different test subjects the interviewees picked up. So just to remind the class on what my question is, the question I am trying to find out is, does a person's collective, communicative, and cultural memories affect how they view events? Now, after interviewing these 6 different people, which if you couldn't tell at this point are split between 3 more typical Americans, more so Caucasian, and then 3 South Asian descendants and Americans, I came to the conclusion that yes, a person's collective, communicative, and cultural memories do in fact affect how they view events. So the first reason I came to this conclusion was the non-South Asian American answers to the 2611 attacks and the partition event. So for instance, the first person, John Magnan, specifically talked about in regards to the 1947 partition, all he really said was that it had been mentioned in some history classes he took. It wasn't a very important event to him, and outside of the only connection he really could make is that he had a Pakistani friend. In regards to the 2611 event, John answered with the fact that he never heard of it. These are both pretty telling in regards to his cultural memory, but he doesn't really have one in regards to these events. He doesn't have ties to that area, and he obviously wouldn't need to hear about that. If we then hear about Josh Espinoza, in regards to the partition, he learned about it in a professor that goes to Geneseo called the BOSS. That would be a collective memory. And all he learned about that was that there essentially was a massive diaspora. So he doesn't know about partition, but he can't really connect to it outside of an academic field. And in regards to 2611, he said something along the lines of, he is not a Hindu or Pakistani, so it really shouldn't matter to him, which would show a lack of a cultural memory in that one regard. He has no real connection to that area or that attack time. So with Katrina, she, in regards to the partition of India event, talked about how waspy her family was, which if I recall is white, Anglo-Saxon, and Protestant. She talked about how her family is German, but she also said that she has ties to like the American Revolution or the Civil War, so her family's been here for a while, which would completely cut her out in regards to the partition culturally. And in regards to the 2611, she just said that there was no real memory. So that's just the first. That's the first thing that you can easily see that shows that a person's collective, communicative, and cultural memories do in fact affect how they view different events. With all the South Asian descendants and Americans, they all, either 2611 was a little rough, but they all at least had something to say about that. And partition heavily plays a role in how South Asian Americans and South Asian descendants view it. It wasn't that long ago. Actually, my oldest uncle was born in 1946, so he was around during partition. He obviously doesn't remember it. I know my own grandma was a refugee, so it was him with my grandpa. He got forced out of Pakistan into India, and that came up a few times. Everyone actually had family that was affected by that and had to become refugees. Tangent touched on the fact that I believe his grandfather was a prisoner of war, so that definitely did affect them heavily culturally. The second reason to show that this question is in fact true is the true dichotomy of answers surrounding 9/11 and post 9/11 between all the test subjects. So if we were to go back to what John said, John talked about how his father was in the military, his dad was in the Navy and was deployed to Iraq in 2003 on a destroyer, in which his dad was a second or third in command on that destroyer and had to in fact launch missiles into Baghdad during the initial assaults. So that definitely had an effect on John and his dad and his family as a whole, but it doesn't really talk about a lot about post 9/11, I guess, not like post-war. It just focuses on, I guess, the war itself and having to fight it. where in comparing that to some other people, they had to face a little more. One of the lasting changes that came with John's father is that he became a little more anti-war heavily, became a lot more liberal. If we were to just look at what Josh Espinoza said, he said that 9/11 simply was just a national tragedy, which is obviously true, but it kind of just stops it there. There's nothing really more. It's more of a mourning, but it's not like a past the mourning, if you could say. And in regards to Katrina, she moved a little farther past it because she did say that she went to a school with a good amount of with a high Muslim population, so that she did understand some of the things that maybe her parents. She mentioned that her parents were parroting the same lines that were said a lot in 2001, 2002, which was that a lot of Muslims just don't like American culture. A lot of the 9/11 hijackers happened because they hate freedom and culture and all that. But Katrina said that she knew that was wrong because she had a lot of Muslim friends from her school. But something that all three of the Caucasian interviewees didn't really mention is that the pure racism that they had to face. Supriya touched on it slightly, but I know Tanjim and Aisha mentioned it far more heavy. Tanjim did mention being a Muslim in the city post 9/11. He mentioned how his family had to put up an American flag to look more patriotic, which is definitely trying to parrot some cultural memory, in the way of symbols and rights, laws, things like that. The American flag is a symbol of freedom, and as Tanjim said, they didn't want to associate it all with the people that did the attack, so the second that stuff happened, they put the flag up. And Aisha, and then Tanjim also said that as a Muslim, he's received hate because people don't like Muslims after 9/11, and that his aunt wears a hijab and has been harassed multiple times, which falls into cultural memory because a hijab is a part of the Muslim religion. And then Aisha mentioned how her parents always talked pre and post 9/11, how work was a lot more harder for Dad. And definitely things that I could also agree with, which are airport security got a lot harder for her, I'm sure. I know my brother always gets screened randomly at the airport, or those random tests where he has to get dragged off to the side. I know I've been taken to the side too as well on some random checks. And she didn't elaborate further, but I'm sure there is some more scrutiny put on that. So that would really be another dichotomy really surrounding the 9/11 and post 9/11 because of, again, the interviewees' collective communicative and cultural memories all differed in that one regard. The South Asian interviewees did have to face a lot more racism, which has affected their lifestyles and how they view things a lot more differently, which brings me to my third point, which is the dichotomy between Aisha and Tanjim and their responses to the Sorbello incident. So the David Sorbello incident, he was a professor of sociology. He made that transphobic quiz last semester. It was very, very bad. But if we look how Tanjim initially responded to it, Tanjim wanted to, while he felt it was transphobic, he didn't want to jump into judgment too quickly. He felt that some of his peers wanted to fire him immediately due to secondhand accounts, but he wanted the facts. He wanted to wait a little bit, maybe just launch a little investigation, see what's going on, and then from there move forward and finally have a just hand in doing what's right. It's possible that he thinks this way because as post 9/11, he himself was discriminated against and had a lot of groupthink and harassment because of that, people just jumping right into the facts. So that might have influenced Tanjim yet again, proving the question correct on how they view different events. That post 9/11 definitely affected how Tanjim could have viewed Sorbello. Same thing with Aisha. She might have felt that way after not only 9/11, but she did mention that after the 26/11 attacks, there was a lot of talk about how Pakistan and Muslims in general, like, were attacking India's way of life, all of that, just lumping all of them together. And it's very possible that Aisha took a lot of this was happening through her life, not just through 9/11, 26/11. I'm sure partition, all of these experiences and memories that she had. And then when Sorbello happens, she does want to help the transgender community. She mentioned that she had a lot of friends in the transgender community. That seems to be the group that she associates with heavily. And that is why she came out heavily against Sorbello, and not even just Sorbello, but the school itself, talking about how the school is kind of not doing, it isn't really doing enough on a lot of things. She mentioned not just Sorbello, but things such as there's a massive amount of sexual assault on campus. There is not enough support for the LGBT community. Geneseo doesn't really have competent hiring backgrounds, how the president seems to just be coming around for photo ops. It's very possible that all of Aisha's experiences and her memories have made it so that she wants to really just help people all the time, and wants to help the people that are downtrodden. And in her eyes, that is getting Sorbello out of the school as fast as possible, really propping up minority groups such as the LGBT community, other minority groups through things like ACE, which is the Alliance for Community Enrichment. And it just shows that there is a true dichotomy between how Aisha and Tanjim reacted in regards to that Sorbello incident. I'm not condoning either one. Both were debated at the time, obviously. There were massive different camps at the time, but just between those two, from what I could tell, that very possibly might be the reason why Tanjim might be using his post 9/11 experiences to say, hey, let's wait a minute, let's get all the facts, let's not just throw Sorbello under the bus. There might be more to the story. We shouldn't be just blanket throwing people under the bus. Aisha might be thinking, okay, I've faced prejudice before. I know how this feels. We need to help the trans community. We need to help the LGBT community, and we need to get Sorbello out of here. So I think that, in addition to the two other reasons, truly does prove my research question, which was, does a person's collective, communicative, and cultural memories affect how they view